Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Today I'm going to be doing my favourite horror movie from each of the horror subgenres. Now when I say each of the horror subgenres, I haven't done every single horror subgenre here. So there are some smaller ones out there like maybe Killer Clown or Shark movies. I haven't included them. I've just gone with 12 of the main sort of ones here. This is just a little bit of fun. Don't forget to leave your favourites from each of the subgenres down below. And also, I have tried to just do this as best as possible into this where I think each film fits in a horror subgenre. So, for example, a horror comedy, some people might consider American Werewolf in London a werewolf movie and a horror comedy, but you know, I can only pick one of them if I go with a movie like that. So you get the sort of gist there. You know, I definitely lean towards more werewolf, put it that way. But it is a horror comedy as well. So, you know, I've tried to go with ones that sort of fit that subgenre more than the other subgenres it may contain in that film. So enough waffling on. Let's get into it with the first horror subgenre on this video. First off, we're going to go with demonic possession. Now, there's a lot of demonic possession movies lately that just don't do anything for me. Probably one of my least favourite horror subgenres. And there's a lot of ones, you know, that have come that are just having kids lying on a bed, screaming and shouting with a little bit of makeup on, you know, throwing people around the room, you know, throwing the furniture across the room. And that just does nothing for me. I don't find that scary at all. And a lot of these later movies like The Ritual and The Pope's Exorcist, I've just tried to replicate what my actual pick for this subgenre is, and that is The Exorcist. A lot of people just copy the homework of that movie and think it's going to work. Another reason for that is because people actually consider this to be the greatest horror movie of all time. I'm not quite there with that, but it is in my top 20. And I recently watched this last year, and every time I watch this film, it grows and grows on me. But when I watched it last year, I really appreciated how awesome this film actually is. I've done a full review on the channel, guys, about this film if you want to check it out. But this is basically seeing this young, sweet, innocent 12-year-old girl become a monster over the course of the movie. Very, very slowly and gradual, but that's another thing I love about this film. It's a real slow burn, which doesn't work for a lot of people, especially, you know, people who are just discovering it for the first time in the last 5 or 10 years. People who are a lot younger than me, of course. And no, I just think that's all due to how great the writing is in this movie and everything, how each little piece comes together to sort of get like people on board with this girl, you know, believing that this girl has actually been possessed because her mother's crying out for help. No one believes it. All the doctors and everything think there's an explanation, and it ultimately takes 2 priests to come along and try and save the day. But there's some great performances along the board here. Ellen Burstyn, you know, was awesome in this movie. You know, Max von Sydow and everything, who I think he was only like 30 in this movie, and they made him look like 70 or something. And we also have Linda Blair, of course, iconic role as Regan. So I know a lot of people think this movie is terrifying, and I'm not quite there with that. But when I watch it, I can appreciate why those people think that, especially back in the time when this movie released in 1973 with the whole religious beliefs and everything. I think a lot more people were sort of into religion back then than they are now. There's a lot of atheism back now, isn't it? And lots of different religions all around us. But I feel like people could have been truly horrified back then. And if I went back in time to 1973 and watched this at the cinema, I think I may have felt the same. But yeah, you know, just one of my standout moments for this movie when I watched it last year is the whole head turn moment. Now, a lot of people say that's iconic and stuff, but I didn't realize how iconic it actually was with the context of what's going on. Because there's this drunk guy in the film, and he went into Regan's room as she's starting to become a little bit sick, but really possessed. And they don't know if he fell out the window drunk or Regan actually pushed him out. And they're kind of in two minds. There's no evidence there. And later on in the movie, Regan turned her head in Pazuzu's voice and said, "Do you know what she did? Your daughter," in the drunk guy's voice. So obviously she pushed him, and that's when I realized in this movie that things are going down a real sinister route, and Regan is becoming very, very dangerous. So yeah, absolutely awesome movie, so well crafted by William Friedkin. And I absolutely love it. So one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and definitely the best in this subgenre. Now we got Werewolf, and this is a subgenre that I kind of wish we got a little bit more of. Compared to vampires and zombies, I don't think there's as many werewolf movies out there, although there are a few I haven't yet to check out. But yeah, the three real ones that stand out here. Silver Bullet, of course, which I think is fantastic. One of the best Stephen King adaptations there. And we also have two that I am always on a knife edge with. I can never really decide which one is my favourite werewolf movie. Last year it was The Wolfman from 1941, and it's kind of flipped now to An American Werewolf in London. So yeah, it's out of them two. It's a razor's edge of to which one I think is better. I appreciate so much about The Wolfman 1941. You know, real classic Universal monster movie there. But if I'm going to watch a werewolf movie, I'm probably going to lean towards An American Werewolf in London. This movie is actually quite scary, to be honest, at times. When I first watched it, I was freaked out with all the dream sequences and everything that David's having. So this guy, David, he's backpacking across the moors with his friend, is attacked by a werewolf. His friend is killed and he survives, but he's slowly morphing into a werewolf himself. Kind of like Reagan does with the demonic possession in The Exorcist, but here he's slowly becoming this werewolf, and he is having all these crazy dreams and everything, and that is really where the horror of the movie is. You know, seeing these crazy dream sequences, they're horrifying, they're really sinister to watch and everything, but yeah, it's just slowly watching him become a monster. And I really like that aspect of the film, you know, that slow burn feel of it. It is a little bit of a horror comedy as well, but I really like the romance angle with him and Jenny Agutter, you know, the nurse who's looking after him and everything. And, you know, it pulls at the heartstrings at times, and it's got a great third act in the central city of London there. Yeah, ultimate werewolf film, isn't it? I mean, I think that a lot of people would have this as their favourite. So that is An American Werewolf in London for Werewolf. Next up, we have Vampire, and this is a subgenre that's getting a lot of resurgence, I think. You know, there's a lot of vampire movies out there, but the last few years, we've had quite a few, haven't we? Like Renfield, most notably Sinners lately, Abigail. Yeah, it's like people are thirsty, excuse the pun, for these vampire films. But I gotta go with the kind of obvious here. Sorry if some of these picks are kind of obvious, guys, but they are known as the best in their subgenres for a reason. And I gotta go with The Lost Boys. From Dusk Till Dawn is in with a shout, but The Lost Boys is where it's at for me. This is my favourite vampire film easily. One of the very first few horror movies that I ever watched. Also leans into horror comedy a little bit there. But yeah, I just love seeing, you know, the characters in this film interact with each other. You know, that there's a little bit of a coming of age story there, sort of, with Sam and the Frog Brothers and everything, you know, going on an adventure to kill some vampires. But then sees Sam and Michael move into this town, Santa Carla, the murder capital of the world, and they come across David and his goony gang of vampires. And Michael starts to slowly become one of these vampires as well. It's up to Sam and the Frog Brothers to put a stop to it all. You got Kiefer Sutherland in there as the sort of head vampire, David, who's awesome in this role, one of my favourite roles by him. And yeah, it's just got a real dripping with 80s flavour. This is the ultimate 80s movie. It's a great soundtrack in there. I really love Tim Capello on that sort of saxophone. I still believe. Absolutely awesome, iconic. And yeah, it's just a real fun movie. Lots of great characters, lots of fun dialogue. I really love the grandpa in this movie, who by the end of the film comes out with one of the greatest quotes ever in a horror movie, where he kind of just doesn't acknowledge all the way through the film that Santa Carla has vampires in. And at the end of the film, he goes, you know, one thing I can't stand about Santa Carla, all of them vampires. And that is just a perfect end to the movie. So yeah, what a great vampire film this is. Dripping with fun, dripping with entertainment. But yeah, just a real fun ride. So that is The Lost Boys. Next up, we have zombie films. Now, this is a horror subgenre I kind of got sick of in the 2010s and everything, because we were just getting them churned out constantly after, like, Shaun of the Dead, which was a bit earlier than 2010, I think. But yeah, we just got a load of them movies, and I go back and watch them now and really appreciate them. Some of them I avoided, like Zombieland and everything, because I just couldn't be bothered with them. now I go back and have a real fun time with them, but you know, we've got some great ones here. Zombie Flesh Eaters, of course, Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead. But I go for the middle section there, and I got to go with Dawn of the Dead. This is in my top 5 horror movies of all time. My nan used to babysit me and my sister, and she either used to bring down Zombie Flesh Eaters or Dawn of the Dead. You know, she just had the real... This was her favourite subgenre, obviously. But yeah, I just remember watching this film as a kid, and I just loved it. And I didn't see it again. Like, I didn't get it on DVD or anything. It was only till it came to Blu-ray by Arrow Video that I found this resurgence for it. I was like, this is the movie I used to watch with my nan all the time. And yeah, it's got my favourite horror movie location in. You know, that shopping mall, or one of my favourite horror movie locations, should I say. In that shopping mall there, just brings a real fun vibe to it, seeing these 4 characters make the shopping mall their own, and they've just got all these shops and everything, all these tools and equipment and weapons at their disposal if any zombies break in. Yeah, just one of, you know, so many things have tried to replicate this, like the Dead Rising game, the remake, of course, but this is just an absolute classic, isn't it? A sequel done so right by George A. Romero. So we had Night of the Living Dead just taking place in the house there, and then he moved it to a totally different location in the shopping mall. Really like the characters. Love Ken Foree in this, you know, just going around with that sniper rifle, taking zombies out, having a time of his life, Flyboy and everything. Yeah, absolute classic film. My one gripe with it is the look of the zombies. Like, I wish they looked a little bit better instead of that blue sort of spray they've got on their face, but that is a small nitpick, because I can look past it for how fun this movie is. And don't, you know, as we realise later on in the film, that zombies aren't the only thing that they've got to look out for. Humans can be the monsters too, as we see with that motorcycle gang who come in. So yeah, really great apocalyptic feel with this one. George A. Romero directed the shit out of it. And yeah, I can sort of throw this one on anytime. That is Dawn of the Dead. Next up, we do have Paranormal. And like Demonic Possession, this is one of my least favourite horror subgenres. And it's weird because a lot of people seem to go to the cinema for these type of ones, and Demonic Possession, you know, like they're the ones that people seem to go and watch, and they're the most popular, but they're probably my least 2 favourites. But there are some standouts in this, of course. The Conjuring 2, I actually prefer over The Conjuring. Insidious, which was very, very nearly my pick, but the more I watch that film, the more I just like the first half. I do like the second, but the first half is stronger. But I gotta go with Sinister. Now, this is a film that has been voted numerous occasions on numerous different lists the scariest horror movie of all time. And whilst I don't know if it is quite that for me, it is definitely a film that scared me when I first watched it. I was really, really got under my skin. Scott Derrickson brought us, you know, a movie that has a terrifying concept for me, which sees Ethan Hawke and his family move into this new home. It's always a new home, isn't it? Where he finds these video reels in the attic, and he starts to watch them, and each one of them is a family who have lived in this house in the past being murdered or killed in a snuff style movie. And what Scott Derrickson does with these reels is sort of film them in 8mm or 16mm. I can't quite recall what the style was, but it was something like that, kind of like he did with the Black Phone 2 in the dream sequences. And he films them in this, and you know, it just gives off such a chilling vibe to it, kind of like it looked like a real snuff film. And that concept to me is terrifying. Why Ethan Hawke didn't run out the house that moment, I was shaking my head, but you later find on in the film that there's a reason for this, and Ethan Hawke just has a death wish, basically. But yeah, go down some real terrifying avenues. That is a real setup for a film, and you know it's gonna be sort of scary if early on it's getting under your skin, but then we get into the whole Bagul character and everything, who is just an awesome concept in himself. One of them films that just really, I've got goosebumps talking about it now. I'm how scary it is. So yeah, one of them that, you know, is kind of masterful in what it does for the paranormal subgenre. Me and my wife were talking about this for days afterwards, and just like, man, wasn't that film so scary? So I gotta go with Sinister for Paranormal. Next up we have comedy horror, and I may have cheated a little bit here because I know a lot of people may not consider this a horror movie. I don't even know if I do really, but it was kind of a hard pick. You know, you've got a lot of great ones out there. Shaun of the Dead, of course. You know, there's so many. But I went with The Babes. Now, sorry if that doesn't qualify for you, but I'm kind of going with it. Because this is one of my favourite films of all time. It's one of them I've rewatched constantly. And we see Tom Hanks living in this neighbourhood where everyone knows each other, and this family move in called the Klopeks, who aren't quite right. They kind of don't fit, you know, they don't mow their lawn, their house is all run down and everything. They haven't given a paint job, and they never come out their house. And Tom Hanks is just noticing a few little strange going on, like them digging in the back garden at 12 o'clock at night in a thunderstorm and everything. And one of them actually does eventually come out to his house and put the garbage in the garbage bin and beat the shit out of it with a stick and everything, which leads Tom Hanks and his friends to search the garbage bin the next day. But Tom Hanks just becomes so paranoid and wants to get together with his friends to discover what is really going on with the Klopeks. So yeah, it has a kind of a Disturbia type feel to it, you know, like a Rear Window type feel, which, you know, it kind of, you can tell it's kind of like it borrowed from Rear Window, I think, a little bit there. But it's just got so many funny moments as well. Like Art, Tom Hanks' friend in this, is awesome. Like what's his name? David. Damn, I forgot the guy's name, but he's so funny in this movie. You know, there's great characters who live in the street, and there's the guy Ricky who thinks he lives in the greatest street in the world because of all this that is going on. He's inviting his friends down to come and watch them break into the Klopeks house and everything. And it really does build up to a great third act as well. But when we actually get to meet the Klopeks, you know, that's always fun. They are so strange, these characters and everything. You know, it's just one of them films that is a delight to watch. So yeah, I gotta go with The Babes for comedy horror. Sorry if that doesn't qualify, guys, but I just went with it. Next up, we're going with Home Invasion. And again, I've cheated a little bit here. Now, there are so many great home invasion films. You know, You're Next. One I watched recently, Inside, the French Extremity film. But when I say I've cheated, it's because this movie kind of flips it on its head. And that is The People Under the Stairs, which sees this young kid called Fool and his, you know, two adult sort of family members break into this house because they think that the landlords that they're breaking into are basically treating the people and the neighborhood that they live in like absolute garbage and trash. And these characters have heard some stories about these landlords and that they're breaking into. But when they get into the house, they don't quite know what they've let themselves in for. And it becomes a bit of a hunt where these people who live in the house start hunting down Fool and Leroy and, you know, the other guy, I forgot his name. But, you know, it becomes, you know, the people who are breaking in are now hunted. And there's so many strange going on with this house. Like the guy who starts to find them, who lives there, dresses up in a gimp suit and everything. They've got kids who they abuse. They've got people who are living under the stairs in the basement who, you know, don't quite fit the criteria of their family. So they just kind of throw them down there and everything. There's a little Rottweiler who chasing Fool around the house constantly. And he's just a little bastard. Like, the most annoying, frustrating dog you will ever see in a horror movie because he's such a vicious little get. People living in the wall, there's all sorts going on in this house. And I just think this is one of Wes Craven's greatest movies. Like, a true gem of his. Like, a lot of people talk about Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, but for me, I do like them films better, but not enough people talk about People Under the Stairs. So yeah, absolutely brilliant film, so much fun. And again, leads into comedy horror a little bit there. But yeah, this is one I've watched so many times. And there is a scene in this where someone, like a kid, gets thrown into a boiling hot bathtub. And I wince every time I see it. One of the hardest scenes to watch in a movie ever. So yeah, People Under the Stairs. If you haven't checked it out, guys, definitely worth a go. Next up, we have Creature Feature. Now, this I don't know if people consider this a creature feature. I think they lean more towards sci-fi horror, which I have not included on this list. But this was a creature made by H.R. Giger that had never existed before until he put pen to paper and it became a reality in this movie. So I'm going to go with Alien, of course. Now, this is the ultimate slow burning horror, if you like, which is Ripley and her crew get a distress signal. You know, they're waking up from hypersleep and say they have to check this out. They go to this planet, and one of the crew members is basically sort of has this sort of spider-looking creature jump on his face and impregnate him with what we've known as a xenomorph. And that for me qualifies as creature feature, when we have this xenomorph run around the ship killing these characters off one by one. Some may even consider it a slasher film in space, because, you know, the characters are basically being picked off one by one. But the design of this damn thing is awesome. You know, it's got acid blood, it's got a mouth that comes out of its mouth and penetrates people. You know, it's strong, it's fierce, the ultimate killer machine, basically. And there's a few little twists and turns along the way in this movie involving some of the characters and everything. Sigourney Weaver is awesome in this. You know, a great final girl to have in this movie. Ridley Scott just directed the absolute shit out of this. Like, this is from 1970. Damn. Is it 1979? I knew the year. My mind's gone blank. But no, it's a 70s movie anyway. But it just looks so pristine and everything, even when you watch it today. It's just an awesome film. And it may not be for everyone, because it takes good, like, 45 minutes, an hour to get going. But that's what I like about it. The mystery surrounding this movie, the unknown where these characters are going to, basically. Yeah, absolutely class film. Gotta go with Alien. Next up, we have found footage. Now, this is a subgenre that a lot of people do not like. However, it's one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most effective horror subgenres out there to scare me. And I have been scared more by this subgenre than any other, basically. And, you know, it came very close to being Hell House, LLC. But I just know I can't go with that. I've got to go with the Blair Witch Project. Now, this was one of the scariest moments of my entire life. When I watched this film, the marketing campaign was awesome. There was whispers going around that this was actually real, kind of just before the internet exploded. And I rented it from my local video shop, watched it with my mum and dad, and we were all terrified. But my God, man, that night I went to bed, I could not sleep. I was seeing a little Blair Witch symbol on my ceiling. You know, obviously it wasn't there, but in my mind it was there. You know, the shadows and everything. I had never seen anything like this before. Now, I know there was found footage films out there just before this, but this is the one that really exploded and became one of the most profitable horror films of all time. It just sees these characters going into the woods to document the history and the legacy of the Blair Witch. And they want to go and find out if it's real or not. Next minute, they're getting lost. They are going in circles for days, coming back to where they started. And it's kind of what you don't see in this movie that really got under my skin. Like, they are waking up in the middle of the night and someone's put a pile of rocks outside their tent, but it's only them there, so it couldn't have been them. It's just, you know, just things that you kind of don't see, and it just shows you glimpses of here and there. A masterfully crafted director film, in my opinion, and it actually felt real. Now, I know it's not, obviously, but at the time, I just couldn't believe what I was watching. And I've watched it recently since. My wife had never seen this movie. We watched it for the first time about 5 years ago, and she even said that it was actually a really scary film. So for me, gotta be the Blair Witch Project. A lot of films have tried to replicate this, but this is the proper OG, in my opinion. That is the Blair Witch for found footage. Next up, we have body horror, and this is another one that's getting a little bit of a resurgence now. We recently got Together, that came out this year. And there's a lot of classics out there, like The Thing, although people may consider that creature feature. Sci-fi horror. Yeah, but The Thing has never really been one of my favourites. I respect that movie a lot. It's not really one of my top tier horror films, though, although I am due a rewatch. But I gotta go with a very, very modern film, and that is The Substance. One of my favourite movies from 2024. I went to cinema to watch this at a screen unseen, and I didn't know what the movie was, and when I watched it, I walked out and went, wow. My mind is blown. That is one of the best horror movies I have seen in years. I absolutely loved it, and I recently rewatched it this year on 4K with my wife who'd never seen it, and I thought it was even better, to be honest. It sees Demi Moore, who was actually up and nominated for an Oscar with this movie, in a little bit of a resurgence in her career. Basically being fired on her 50th birthday from this TV show that she has, you know, where she does all exercises and everything. And the guy, played by Dennis Quaid, who runs this show, wants a new sort of a younger female presenting this. And Demi Moore finds this drug on the black market that can give her the best young version of herself, which is played by Margaret Qualley. And Margaret Qualley gets this job and starts living her life to the full, you know, being this big time TV presenter. But she's got to swap the body with Demi Moore's body every other 7 days. And that becomes a little bit of a conflict. And if they don't stick to the rules, a little bit of body horror comes into play. And I won't say too much more than that if you haven't seen it, guys. But I absolutely thought this was an awesome movie. The body horror and the practical effects were fantastic. Caroline Forgay directed the absolute shit out of this movie. And, you know, the performances from Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, awesome. And it really does have a social commentary on sort of, you know, female ageism, if you like. And it's not just female, it's male too. But ageism and how that impacts people, how it runs in the industry and everything, because it is a real thing. Really does have, you know, sort of play on that, but go to the almost far extremes of it. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. One of the best horror films I've seen in years, and I have to put it as the best body horror film. And that is not just being, you know, recency bias. I generally would have this as the best body horror film. I thought it was friggin' fantastic. So that is The Substance. Okay, next up we have psychological horror. Now, this is one, depending on how you interpret it. I've always a little bit confused about this one. So psychological horror could be something that sort of sticks with you, like Jaws, where you're afraid to go in the water, or Final Destination, where you're scared of flying because you've watched this film, or it could be psychologically in the movie, kind of like Silence of the Lambs, where we're caught in Hannibal Lecter's head and what's he really thinking? Is he throwing Jodie Foster off here and there? And I very nearly, like, I am going to go towards that side of things with this subgenre, and I very nearly went with Silence of the Lambs. It probably is a better movie than the one I've picked, but I think this one I've picked deserves such a massive shout out, and I just absolutely love the movie. I really do, and that is Frailty, directed by Bill Paxton and also starring Bill Paxton. The concept of this film is awesome in itself, which sees Bill Paxton going home to his kids. He's like this religious father, and he says, I've been visited by an angel at work, and this angel wants us to do God's work. We've been chosen by God to wipe out these demons, and these demons are walking around the earth disguised as humans. And one of the kids believes him and wants to go on board and is like, Dad, I'm up for it. Come on, let's go and do what God's told us to. And the other kid thinks he's an absolute raging lunatic. What I really like about this film, the first time you watch it, is it involves the viewer so much. You kind of don't know whether to believe Bill Paxton, or do you believe this kid who thinks he's an absolute psychopath? And the movie never really reveals itself until towards the end, where this goes in so many different twists and turns along the way, and it has one of the greatest endings to a horror movie ever. Matthew McConaughey, in one of his earlier roles, awesome in this, but it is definitely where Bill Paxton shines the most. You know, in one of my favourite roles by him. Man, it's just such an awesome movie. It really is. Along the way, the mystery unraveling itself, and you're just like, wow, where is this movie going? You are so invested. I absolutely love this film. I don't want to say too much more than that, guys, because if you haven't seen it, I'll just end up spoiling it for you and get too involved with me telling you how good it is. But if you've not checked out Frailty, guys, an absolute underrated gem, one of the best horror films ever made, and one that deserves so much more love. I think it's getting a little bit more love now over the years when YouTubers and stuff are starting to call this movie out as a hidden gem. But if you haven't seen it, just watch it right now. No, no, after this video. So that is Frailty. And I've saved the best to last, guys. My favourite horror subgenre, and that is, of course, slasher movies. Now, there's so many I could have picked here. There was always going to be one, but, you know, I could have went with the Nightmare on Elm Street, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, my favourite, Child's Play 2, Scream, the list goes on. Most notably, Terrifier, which is just blown up now, and Art the Clown is a horror icon and everything. So many great slasher movies. This is the reason I love horror, because I watched so many slasher films as a kid. Friday the 13th and everything, Halloween, you name it. But I've actually gone with something I don't know if I actually consider a slasher movie. But the more I looked this up and everything, I didn't know what genre to put it in other than slasher. And that is the 1974 film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, I wouldn't really say it follows the whole rules of a slasher film, really. It kind of feels like a pre-slasher where, you know, Halloween was, or Black Christmas, with the first true slasher movie, really. But anyway, I'm going to put it in slasher. If you type in slasher movies on Google, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre will come up. But I've always been on the fence whether to call it a slasher film, but I'm just going with it because this is my favourite horror movie of all time. I absolutely fucking love this film. I get so amped up every time I talk about it. Tobe Hooper's masterpiece. Who is a director I'm a little bit hit and miss with, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of movies he's made that I just don't care for. There's been more negatives than positives for me with his filmography. But man, what he pulled off here was genius. Bunch of friends going to the outback in Texas. They come across Leatherface's house, and shit hits the fan from there, basically. Leatherface and his family of cannibals. But man, I just love the whole summertime feel to this movie. It makes you feel hot and sticky. You know, it really it's the ultimate film to watch in summertime. The whole low budgety feel of it, just, you know, makes the movie stand out even more. It's almost documented by Tobe Hooper. You know, you got crazy characters along the way, like Leatherface himself, the hitchhiker who gets in the van early on. You know, it's an absolute thrill ride. It's only an 83-minute long movie, but man, it seems shorter because you're just having such a great time with it. Now, this is a film that I didn't care for too much when I first watched it. Kind of like The Exorcist. This was banned, and it didn't get like released over here until about 1999, like The Exorcist. I just remember all these old movies that were banned coming out on video, and I finally watched it and lent it off my friend in school, and I was expecting so much more to it because I'd heard it was so bad. But there's hardly any gore or anything in this film. It's kind of what you don't see or you imagine in your head, like when is it Pam is put on that meat hook there. You kind of don't see anything, you just see a jerk, but it's all in your head, you know what happened there. And the more I watch it, the more I've just grew to appreciate it over the years. And this is one of my most watched horror movies of all time. So I've been and seen this on the cinema, and I think absolutely love this film. I can't wait to review it over on this horror channel. I believe there's maybe a new one coming along. So when that happens, I'll probably review the whole series. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, me, absolutely iconic film, over 50 years old now, and it doesn't feel like it's the age of the day. So I gotta go with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for slasher. Okay guys, hope you all enjoyed this fun little video I made. You know, I had a good time doing this one. Don't forget to leave your favourites in the subgenres. What subgenres do you think I should have included here? If I get enough, maybe I'll do a part 2 to this with like Killer Clown, Shark, Anthology. There's a big one I didn't really include. But if you guys would like to see that, please do let me know. Thanks so much, guys. Please give this video a like and subscribe to this channel if horror is your sort of thing. You all take care, and I'll see you all in the next video.